For having me here. My name is Jason Chen. I'm the Director of Game Services at Amazon. Gaming has always been a passion of mine. That's how I got my glasses. Staying up 3 in the morning, too close to the TV, playing games on my NES. That's what happened when you're young and love video games. So I'm glad to be here today. I'd like to share some of the insights that we have learned as operating a store. And I just wanted to, before we get started, I often get asked by friends in the industry, Amazon games, what does that mean? And for us, the way we look at it, you have Amazon.com. Everybody knows us as a distributor of physical items. A lot of you don't know is we are also a service provider. And we start with Amazon Web Services. This is the foundational building blocks. For those who have any backend, may have heard of the cloud infrastructure, whether it's compute or storage. That's what AWS is all about. And we have several distribution channels as well. Whether you're a game developer for the Android platform or for PC or for Mac, we have ways to help you to reach customers. And just a while ago, we launched a dedicated indie storefront for indie developers that are making games for the PC and the Mac. And if you distribute your Android apps and games through us, we also launch a world-class engagement report to help you understand how your customers are using your apps. And there are multiple ways to monetize as well. In-app purchasing, mobile ads, Amazon coins. These are just some of the examples. But what's most exciting to me personally is around services. There are multiple teams at Amazon building services, and we build services to help developers to help them move faster, hopefully reach more customers, hopefully generate more money, more revenue for their games. So Game Circle, as an example, that's the services my team built. We have the basic achievements, leaderboards. More importantly, we have Cloud Save, which supports cross-platform. It supports offline. It supports auto conflict resolution. And last year, when we released this, it's only for Kindle Fire platform, but a month ago, we have extended that to all Android devices, to all Android marketplaces. And soon, we'll be taking that to other devices as well. So that's just a quick overview of Amazon and how we relate to games in addition to acquiring a studio a few years back. So being an app distributor, it was important for us to monitor the trends. Since we launched in-app purchasing last March, we found that there are a huge growth in adoption for customers buying things in-game. And compared to last Casual Connect, when we first shared this data, we saw the adoption continue to grow by 55% in the last year. So it looks like the whole free-to-play in-app purchasing model is here to stay. So we dug deeper and we asked ourselves, are there material differences between top 50 grossing versus the rest? And to do this, we use a technique called cohort analysis. So for those who don't know what a cohort is, it's a very simple way of looking at things through time. So we basically pick a group of customers on a specific date, and we observe them through a period of time and just see how things change. And in this case, we picked a date, and we grab all the customers who have purchased and installed a freemium game. And that's the starting point of our cohort. Then we group them into two groups. Group A are the ones that have installed a top 50 grossing, and Group B. So let's step through this and let's see what we found. So starting point, we normalize all the data so it's easier to do the side-by-side comparison. So we normalized it to show that Group A has 100 people who have purchased and installed the game, and Group B that has the same size, same population. Immediately, people are playing these games, right? 87 in Group A and 88 in Group B. What's interesting though, there are people who have purchased, installed, but never launched the game on the day. Maybe they do it later, but they didn't launch it on that day. So in that case, there's 13 in Group A and 12 in Group B. Now let's look at uninstalls. There are actually people who bought it, who installed it, who tried it. Maybe they didn't like it. They uninstalled it right away. And in this case, it's a relatively even split. You have 14 in group A and 16 in group B. Now here's some good news. People are actually paying day one. In this case, we see 2 from each group that are paying. But if you look at this side by side, they're really very well balanced, right? So we're scratching our head. So if I just look at this, I cannot tell which game is the top 50, which game is not a top 50. So we dug deeper, and we start by looking at the engagement. So here we have average session length measured in terms of minutes. Group B is actually leading here. Their game is slightly stickier, 7.4 minutes versus 7 minutes compared to Group A. But still a relatively 50-50 split. Then we look at number of sessions per active player. In this case, okay, people are coming back more frequently in Group A than they are in Group B. Combining these two, you have the total timeshare, and the split among the two. Group A, the top 50 grossing, is leading by about 10%. So they have about 60% of the pie. How does this translate in terms of revenue? So we index everything to 100%, again, to help us to illustrate the delta. Group A, they're purchasing slightly more number of items than Group B, but not by much, only 9%. However, the average selling price of these items, Group A are paying more. And combined, the average revenue per paying user, RPPU, Group A is leading out of the gate by 54%. So this is day one, and I know there's a lot of data, and this is just the beginning of it. So we're going to step through time and see how things change or don't change over the next month. So I'm going to fast forward a little bit through this, otherwise we'll be here all afternoon. Okay, so a day later, the number of paying users dropped to 1 in each bucket. Now keep in mind, this is a cohort. This means that we're taking a group of users from one day and we observe them through time. This is not the same as your typical DAU, MAU, that are snapshot metrics, right? In the snapshot view, you have users, new and old, and you aggregate them together. But because we're doing a cohort, it is natural to see decay over time, and this is where when people are talking about your 7-day retention, your 14-day retention is the same concept. So the decay here in paying is natural. Obviously, same applies for active users. We're down to about 40, 43 to 45 in each bucket, and there are slightly more uninstalls happening here, not much. Then all of a sudden, you have a bucket of roughly 40 players that have the game installed on their device, but didn't play a day later. Doesn't mean they stop playing, they may come back, but there are these void that's happening right here. If you look at the lower right, in terms of engagement metrics, the session length split is still about the same, 50-50. However, number of sessions, Group A is leading just slightly, but that does result in an increase in terms of timeshare. Revenue-wise, A is still buying a little bit more in terms of number of items, but not much. It's still that little bit of advantage there, and at 12% on this date. The average selling price, however, has inched up again. And an end result of your RPPU, Group A continues to widen the gap. So that's a day after these players have purchased and installed the game. But again, what's fascinating to me is if I look at the top part of the chart, it's still balanced. I still couldn't tell who is winning. Only until you look at engagement, timeshare, and revenue, that's where you can start to spot who are actually doing well in terms of monetization. Now, fast forward a couple of days, this is what we see. Now, don't be alarmed. There are still people there. They are still paying. It's just for this sample size, they get rounded off. Again, this is a cohort, it's a natural decay. But what we're seeing is that your active users also shrunk a little bit, 26, 27 in each bucket. And your uninstall widened a little bit, but you created another void of people who have the game on the device not playing. Average session length, still a 50-50 split. But now we're looking at the total session length per active users, per active players. In group A, it's gaining. It's gaining momentum. It's almost 70% of the pie. And on the right, when you look at the revenue side of it, we're reaching almost a 2-to-1 ratio for RPPU. And a week after they have installed the game, this is what we're seeing. Group A has reached a 2-to-1 ratio in terms of time play, and RPPU is off the chart. Now, just one disclaimer, we did this cohort only on one day, so it is normal to see some fluctuations in terms of data. If we have more time and do this through a course of time, we'll see a much smoother gap. But it is no doubt that players in Group A are spending more as a result. 2 weeks since they have installed the game, now A has 70% of the timeshare in terms of revenue-wise is still leading, even though it came down a little bit from that fluctuation point. It still came down a little bit, but still 2-to-1 ratio compared to the Group B. And your active users continue to shrink. So, last day of the month, only 9 players from each group are still playing the game. You have about 60 players there that have the game on the device not playing. And about 30 players are just, they've tried it, they've done it, they uninstalled it, they're probably not likely to come back. Right here, timeshare-wise, A is almost 3/4 now of the chart, of the pie. And then RPPU is still 2x of the competition. So I know this is a lot of data. We went through it real quick, so I'm going to sort of slow down a little bit and then run through the cohort again. And there are 2 things I'd like you to pay attention to. Number of sessions and average selling price for the item. So this is day 1, day 2, this is day 4, day 8, day 15, and day 30. So it's a very simple cohort analysis. But by doing so, it gave us a better view into what's happening. If you just look at your snapshot data like your DAU, your MAU, it's really hard to tell if you're actually doing well or not. And the 2 needle movers we found by doing this simple analysis was that instead of optimizing your play session, each session, you should optimize number of sessions, right? You don't need to make your game more sticky. People are just playing around 7 minutes regardless of the group. And that's maybe because due to the nature of they're on a mobile device. Maybe they don't have more than 7 minutes to play the game. But if you can get them to come back more often, then you increase your total timeshare. And in terms of revenue side of it, even though what we're seeing is an output, meaning that people are paying more per item, I think the real message there is that as a developer, you should design high-value items inside your game so that players are more compelled to pay more. And if you can master these 2, then you can drive a difference in your business. And lastly, don't forget there are 60% of users that still have your game on the device. They haven't uninstalled it, they just haven't played it. If there's a way for you to get them back, it's probably cheaper than trying to spend ad dollars to acquire a new user. So the cohort, we normalize the data, so it's really hard to see sort of in terms of a scale. So hopefully this chart can give you a better picture. This is the number of in-app purchasing that's taken place by hour since the game was downloaded. And we shared this last year at Casual Connect. We refreshed the data for today, and we saw a similar trend. A lot of purchases still happen within the first 3 days, but then tapered off. And if you put this in perspective in terms of your cohort, if you recall a cohort where Group A is higher RPPU, there on the number of orders that's happening here, it sets apart really fast in terms of who is monetizing well and who is not. And we found for customers that stay longer, they're willing to spend more. Maybe because they're getting more attached with your game. Maybe they find the game more engaging. Maybe they've already made some investment into it and they want to double down on those investments. And what we're seeing here is that the average selling price of in-app items has gone up over time, plus 60% 30 days later. Now, in the cohort, we saw the widening gap between Group A and Group B in terms of average selling price for the items. Actually, both groups have benefited from this trend. It's just that Group A is benefiting at a much more accelerated pace. That's why you see the widening gap. But right here is very clear, right? Players come in, they may buy a lot of units in the beginning, and then they buy less, but they buy at a higher price point. So as a developer, you should also think about how do you build and maintaining that relationship with your customers. So obviously, you want to engage them super early just because that concentration of orders. And that translated to 18% of a customer's value is recognized on that first day. You want to keep them around as well because 44% of repeat purchase happen within 1 hour of a previous purchase. Now, if you recall last year's presentation, that number was at 48. It's down 4%. However, what we've seeing is an increase of adoption from consumers buying things in-app. So there are more people trying out freemium items here. And you want to give them a reason to come back. Obviously, you saw that a lot of price is happening in a later life cycle. And what we saw is 56% of the total purchases are repeat purchases. Now, compared to last year, this is down 11%, but we see that as a combination of more people buying, more people trying things out, as well as early adopters getting more sophisticated and then went straight to a higher value proposition items. 62% of the revenue occur after the first 7 days. This is actually a bump of 10% from last year. And it's a signal saying that people are still spending, but they spend later in the life cycle. And 35% of the revenue occur after the first 30 days. Now, this number is actually down 9% from last year. And what we're seeing is that now there's a concentration of revenues happening between day 7 and day 30. It's probably a symptom of more games in the market, more games get released more faster, but developers don't really optimize the experience beyond 30 days. So in closing, I'd just like to say that if you're a developer, if you're data hungry, use cohort analysis to help you to understand what's happening in your world. And remember, first impression is super important, right? 18% of the value is recognized on the first day. And that's your starting point for you to optimize your business. And when you optimize, think about number of sessions and think about creating high value items. And make sure your game can support those high value items. But if you miss that crucial first day, life is full of second chances. 20% of the value happens between day 2 and day 7. 27 of the value sits between day 7 and day 30. And if they're still around, in a cohort, we saw 9 people still stick around after a month. Keep them around longer because they represent 35% of the revenue. They are your most loyal customers. And lastly, don't forget about the 60% of the people that have your game on their device but not playing. Find a way to re-engage them, reactivate them, and then turn them into your loyal customers. So that's a lot of data in a short period of time. I hope that's helpful for you as a developer as you think about building and operating your game. And if you'd like to learn more about Amazon and some of the services we provide, those are the links. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Jason. We have time for 2 questions, so I'm going to take yours, and then I'll come back to you, okay?
So you had a chart that showed basically purchases by hour. Was there a reason it was spiky on like the 24th?
Yeah, because it's by hour, right? So that's when people are awake and people are playing.
Okay, so that was it. It actually assumes then that it follows. That's a given territory, not globally, right?
That's looking at our US data. That's
okay,
correct.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Did you adjust your data for like outliers, like overachievers and underachievers?
No. You mean people who
Like,
play a lot more?
Yeah, well, the apps that just spike with. So is that all averaged?
Oh,
into your
yeah, this
data?
is the average of the top 50 grossing within that month of our study and rest of the freemium games within that month of our study.
Did you notice any apps that were sort of skewing the data in one direction or the other?
No, because once we average it out, there's no one particular driver that's moving the needle one way or the other.
So one of the things that I missed that I wanted clarification on was this was the top 50 grossing apps in the Amazon App Store for Android?
That's correct, for the month that we took for the sample size.
Got it. Okay, if anybody else has questions for Jason, I'm sure you can catch him after the presentation, or you can contact them at any of those links up there. And I'd like to say thank you again for a data-packed presentation, Jason.
Thank you.